Oh my god, it's Metal Gear! Greetings and salutations, my beautiful people, and we're here at part 3 of Caddy's Retrospectives for the Metal Gear Solid games. Obviously, we're now at number 3 because it's part 3, so it's Metal Gear Solid 3. Part 3. 3. You don't need me to tell you that. You just look at the title. Is it up there? Or is it down there? Who knows? YouTube's crazy. But you can read the title, can't you? Can't you?
Okay, so Hideo freaking Kojima's two very good and near perfect games. And then Mr. Kojima thought he'd do a Star Wars and make a prequel. The future of Solid Snake and Raiden were left floating into the abyss, leaving room for an entirely new plot thread. And oddly enough, not just a prequel to MGS1, but a prequel to the entire beginning of the Metal Gear chronology. That was a pretty ballsy move, Kojima. But then again, your entire career has centered around ballsy moves, hasn't it? Ballsy Smith. But this was actually a brilliant idea because players finally got to witness the origin of Big Boss and begin to scratch the surface on his questionable future actions in the series and whether or not they actually deserved any justification. And this wasn't just a great idea from the plot standpoint, but also from the gameplay standpoint. For now, players could fully experience the stripped back sneaking essentials of Metal Gear before it became bloated and seeping in its own insane gadgetry.
And again, I'm gonna try not to ramble with this one and cut all the bullshit out of it because I've heard many a person proudly admit that this is their favourite Metal Gear game of all time, and some people even say it's just their favourite overall game of all time. And how good actually is it, eh? Well, let's find out as we dive into Metal Gear Solid 3.
Well, let's start at the beginning, which is a very good place to start. What's going on this time, Ballsy Smith? Well, this game decides to take place during the turn of the Cold War, and in a sense, it creates a sub-alternate history, referencing all the major events of the time, such as Kennedy's assassination, and letting the characters' interactions actually affect what happened during that time period. It's kinda cute. And this game also features another playable character, Naked Snake, later to be known as Big Boss. And like MGS2, this game was set into 2 parts. The first part was Virtuous Mission, in which
Naked Snake,
aided by
Major Zero,
and his old mentor,
the Boss,
attempts to rescue a defecting Soviet scientist called
Sokolov,
who's being forced to develop a nuclear-equipped tank called the Shagohod. It's a subtle foreshadowing. Do you see it? And everything goes swimmingly for our heroes until it turns out that the boss actually defects from the US, providing 2 stolen Davy Crockett mini nuke missiles for her new benefactor known as Colonel Volgin, who is attempting to overthrow Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, with the help from the Cobra Unit, another group of elite warriors theming from the first 2 games. Sokolov actually ends up being captured by the Cobra Unit, and then Snake is thrown off a bridge by the boss and he breaks his arm, and it's very, very disgusting. Volgin then proceeds to launch one of the missiles at the base that Sokolov was being held at, covering up the theft of the missiles, and in turn having the boss being blamed for the assault.
Fun fact, did you know that the date of Virtuous Mission is actually the 1-year-old birthday of Hideo Kojima? He wanted to use his original birth date, but postponed it for a year in order to let the Kennedy assassination become part of the story. What a silly sausage.
And then this leads into part 2 of the game, Operation Snake Eater, where the Soviets discover that they actually detected a US aircraft, which is the one that dropped off Snake earlier, at that time, which then leads them to blame the US for the nuclear attack on the base, and bringing everything to the tip of nuclear war! So now Snake has to return to the Soviet Union and prove America's innocence by stopping Volgin forever and eliminating the defecting traitorous traitor, the boss. Now I'm actually going to start with a positive/negative opinion here. The plot is much simpler than the last game, and it features less philosophical nonsense and confusing threads. And even though I really loved that stuff, this plot is awesome in its own right. But I must say that the scripting in small sections of this game was just bad, even for Metal Gear Solid. I understand that the game had a silly edge to it with the Cobra Unit, but good God, listen to this line.
The end is saving what life he has left in him for battle, but he'll wake up when the time is right. And when he does, it will be the end for the boy.
I know the last games had these kinds of lines and such, I won't bother, you know which ones they are. But in this game, they really stick out like a sore thumb. For the time that it's set, it just seems so out of place. But then again, that is a huge nitpick. So I'll shut up now, and I'm gonna talk about the awesome. And the awesome included a much more grounded protagonist, Naked Snake. As we all know, Solid Snake is badass and everything, but he's still a pretty emotionless and built-for-the-job genetic copy of the man who originally earned the position of world legend. And because of that, he was much more relatable as a person. He was just an average soldier that overcame excruciating odds with no genetic tampering, which made him much more badass, in my opinion. I mean, when I first saw him smile at the start of the game in Virtuous Mission, it set me up exactly for what his character was going to be like, and I could understand him so much more as a person. It's just, you bond with him from that moment. It's then that you realise that he's just a man, a pawn in this entire situation, and it's just so sad. This game's plot also focused a lot on loyalty, and in Snake's case, it was a constant battle between the loyalty to the one that he loves, or loyalty to his country and halting a nuclear catastrophe. And there are plenty of really subtle and moving moments mixed in with the insanity that really help you reflect on your actions and begin to question these themes yourself. What a brilliantly bumtastic concept. Well, that, and you can make Snake throw up.
I'm a fucking moron for deciding to tackle all of these games. There's just so much to say about them, it's insane. But don't worry, I'm going to try my best here, and I hope you can see where I'm coming from, so...
Well, I'm going to start with a point that I'll probably get a lot of flack for. Kojima stated that he suffered from 3D camera sickness, and so decided to, in devotion with a solid trilogy, keep the overhead camera. And for this kind of game, I personally did not like it. I found myself stopping and looking forward every 5 seconds to check for enemies, and I couldn't find my bearings if I was running away, and I couldn't see where I was going or what I would run into, and just... Ugh. I appreciate what Kojima wanted to do, but that third-person camera was a much better idea. And with the vast open jungle opposed to the simple, squared indoor stronghold, the overhead camera didn't give the layout, the wandering enemy movements, and just the overall environment any justice or fun to it. I mean, look at these areas! I don't understand why you wouldn't want to play third person with a game that looks this good. So for the sake of argument and more flexible and free camera movement, I'll be playing the HD re-release in the third person, technically making it subsistence. I know I'm cheating, but... fuck you. Well, anyway, enough whinging and whining because this game now needs discussing. First things first, am I the only person in the whole world that watched this entire intro every time the game booted up? I hope I'm not, but needless to say, this intro is one of my favourite in all video gaming, and I love how it's all a big, supermassive heads up to James Bond, with all the classic dramatic song cadences and the flashy visual effects. It was captivating, sets the tone perfectly, and it's brilliant. And not just in the intro, but in this game, yet again, Kojima exploited his and decided to innovate even further by basically completely changing up the gameplay. And unlike the changes between 1 and 2, with loads of little details and mechanics spiced into the foundations, 3 is a completely new vision in the stealth gameplay, and in my opinion, it's the best.
Fun fact, did you know that this game was originally conceived for the PS3, but the long time gap forced Kojima to work the PS2 to its limits? He later admitted that in subsistence, the new online feature, an added third-person camera, was to test the water for the upcoming Metal Gear Solid 4 to see what worked and what didn't.
This game also focused on one very strong word: survival. Bitch. And the survival element, for the time period it was set and the way that the game was more realistically panned out, just nailed it. I mean, you didn't have any of the stupid gadgetry and advanced weaponry, you just had you and the wilderness. This game was just as much a battle with the environment and its inhabitants over a battle with those crazy Russians. And that was the game's biggest change, the wilderness. Pretty much 3/4 of this game was set in the jungle, and it was far more dangerous and yet useful for the stealth mechanics, and the potential was used to its full extent. The game emphasized the environments as you could camouflage your body and face from the enemies, indicated by the top right index meter, instead of the simple walls and cubbyholes that allowed you to avoid the enemy's viewing cone. And this was also affected by how fast and loud you were, and if you were running or crawling, and even fake animal heads could be used to mask you. And obviously, Soliton radar? Fuck that! You're in the 60s. Instead, you get the beep, beep, beep. Oh, there's something. Equipment to help you out. And the box! And most of the gadgets and weapons had strings attached, such as the battery meters for your goggles or radars, and even suppressor meters for certain guns. Not to mention, as this was the 60s, you were given directions, a compass and a map, and you had to work the terrain and solve all the mysteries of the jungle by your own concentrated wit and expertise with tracking and planning. Kojima stated that instead of beginning the missions right inside the strongholds like the other games, the more realistic approach would be to drop off the agent a few miles away from the destination.
The game was actually really open-ended and explorable, and it used realistic travelling techniques. I mean, you'll probably find that 4/5 of the entire game is basically just getting from point A to a very, very, very far away point B, and no matter how many times you do it or how long the distance is, it never feels stale, which when you think about it is just unbelievable. Half the time you don't even realise how far you're walking, it just goes so quickly, but yet you're eating up all of your time. If you can do that with any kind of form of media, you're a fucking master.
And unlike the previous games and their basic life bars, in this game you had a life bar and stamina meter.
I fucking love that.
The stamina meter decreased over time depending on what you weigh and what you were carrying in your backpack, and it affected things like your steadiness with weaponry, how quickly your injuries heal, and even your stomach grumbles giving away your position. Then on the other hand, your life bar was affected by the usual gunshots and burns, but this time relied on the stamina to heal quicker, as there were no items that replenished your health immediately.
I fucking love that.
And what made it even better was the necessity to keep on top of your injuries and heal them yourself with the necessary medicines and surgery, from curing food poisoning to mending broken bones.
I fucking love that.
And because of this harsh outdoors, this could even be from poisonous bites from animals, cuts, and booby-trapped tranquilizers, let alone just enemy fire.
But how does the stamina recover?
I hear you cry. Well, from hunting your own food via the flora and fauna. Or to make it easier, plants and animals, if you don't use Google. And these could be anything from mushrooms and fruit to snakes and vultures, all with different consequences and benefits depending on what animal or plant you ate.
I fucking love that.
And it's actually very cool that you can eat a snake. Because, you know, it's Snake Eater!
Another thing innovated by Ballsy Smith was the CQC, motherfucker! In which guards could be grabbed from behind and interrogated, used as human shields, knocked out, or have their throats slit, all via the pressure-sensitive controls.
And let's talk about the boss battles. They're fantastic. But
don't get me wrong, these boss battles are some of the best that gaming has to offer, and I can look past the silliness of some of them, but I didn't feel as much build up towards some of them as I did with Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2. It was much more of an ambush type thing with them. Instead of constant warnings and backstories and even multiple encounters, you're just wandering along and boom! Whoops, hello mate, how are you doing? I'm just taking a fine stroll through your beautiful jungle, and oh, is that what you're gonna do? Well, I'll be blowed, you must be a boss battle. You know, they just kind of happen. They come and then they go. But that does not deteriorate from the fact that these bosses are fucking ace. And this time around, instead of incorporating more puzzle-solving, futuristic aspects from 1 and 2 to take these guys down, this was much more raw, much like the time period, and based everything on pure, condensed skill with your weapons and maneuvers. And I will say that the end is maybe the greatest boss battle ever. I swear to God, it always takes me at least 45 minutes to take him down, and every second is just as tense and as terrifying as the last. And this leads rather handsomely onto the detail yet again. The Kojima-branded sense of humour and self-referential fourth-wall gags were off the chart with this game, with even more over-the-top villains borderlining hilariously ridiculous. And even going as far as to mock Raiden in the form of Rykov, allowing Snake to finally get his revenge towards him as a throwback to fan response. The details ran in real time, something that was considered strangely almost taboo with console gaming, but was a fucking excellent idea. Things like food could rot if you left the game for a few days, and the epic boss fight with the end could be easily avoided by just leaving the game a week, coming back to it, and finding out that he just died of old age.
genius, my friend!
Easter eggs as well were ripe aplenty, as to be expected, and the music, once again, was historically relevant, not to mention using elements of leitmotif to correspond with the woody and jungle environments like pipe instruments, traditional wooden percussion, and woodwinds to accompany the cinematic strings and guitars. Yet again, another top draw job thanks to Mr. Gregson Williams. And do I even need to talk about this game's ending? No, I didn't think so. It gets me every time, and I'm convinced that you have no soul if this didn't touch you.
And does Metal Gear Solid 3 Hold up today? Well, if you minus the original camera, in my opinion, this game is just unbelievable. It's nearly 10 fucking years old, and it feels like it was made last week. I don't know how it's managed to age so well. And when you have a look at all the other stuff that was released in 2004, like... I'd probably say it was the best from that year.
What was to come of these 3 games then? Well, where do I begin? Mobile games, spin-offs, more games centered around the far future of the Metal Gear universe, more games centered around Big Boss and the events leading up to Metal Gear on the MSX2 spanning multiple formats and consoles, next-gen and HD remakes, graphic novels, the best idea ever, allowing me to play 2 of my favourite games ever in HD whilst taking a shit, and let's not forget the legend that is Metal Gear Solid 4. I'm so sorry guys, but there are far too many reasons why I haven't added this in as a special bonus 4th video, but needless to say, I'm gonna tease you with this, and I might make a video about it in the near future. But just to warn you, that video will be a good 4 hours or something.
If I had to pick my favourite, very, very, very close to impossible, but I think I'm gonna have to go with 3.
I love them all entirely for different reasons, but I feel as though, from a gameplay standpoint, the replayability with 3 is the strongest. And with the long cutscenes and expository radio and codec calls, this one always feels fresh every time you play it, which is a tough call for an MGS game, maybe perhaps the other exception being Peace Walker. Although, I've changed my mind. No, I'd say 1 is my favourite. No, I'd actually say 3. No, 1, 3. 3 or 1. 3 or 1? 3? 1? Snake? Or Big Boss? I don't know! I don't know! I just don't know, okay? I fucking love ambiguity!